Despite some of the recent polling, Donald Trump's currently on pace for victory. What is up, people of the internet? It is me, Real American, back in with a new video, and today we have to talk about the 2024 presidential election because Donald Trump's still on pace for victory, and I know there's a bunch of people claiming that Donald Trump has no pathway to victory, he cannot win, Kamala Harris will win in a landslide. I understand that, but when you actually look at the data, it becomes apparent real quickly that, no, this theory that Kamala Harris is this clear favorite, she's gonna win in a landslide, the crap that people are saying on Twitter, it's not based off of reality, it's based off of their opinion, it's based off of their delusions. Again, I am not denying the idea that Harris could win. I think there is a pathway for her. But when you look at the actual data, that, by the way, these same people are citing, but incorrectly, by the way, it becomes apparent Harris is not gonna win in a landslide, at least for now. Could that change? I guess. But where's this Harris landslide at? Look at the current polling. The RCP average right now is Harris plus 1.5. Yeah, Harris plus 1.5. That's nothing. For crying out loud, back in 2016, Hillary Clinton won by 2. So Harris is doing even worse than Clinton. But yet that somehow means she's gonna win in a landslide? No. A 1-point victory for a Democrat? That's a loss. In the Electoral College, a 1-point win is really a defeat. They have to win by like 3 to 4 points just to barely win the Electoral College. That's a fact. This idea that Kamala Harris is gonna win in a landslide is just right now not even backed by the same data that people are using. Now, some people are going to say, well, look at the Washington Post, look at Emerson, which, yeah, the Washington Post has Harris plus 4, so does Emerson, and CBS News has Harris plus 3. And I'm not discrediting CBS News, Emerson, whatever, because, they're all right pollsters, especially Emerson. But are people really going to start citing the Washington Post? Really? I thought we were done looking at that garbage pollster. Remember, this is the same pollster that back in 2020, their final national poll was Biden plus 11. Not only that, they had quite possibly the most notorious poll ever, Biden plus 17 in Wisconsin. Are people really going to say a Harris plus 4 from the Washington Post is somehow good? When it's entirely possible they're going to be off by 7 points again. Hell, they were off by 16 in Wisconsin. So, this Harris lead from the Washington Post, which is not a good pollster, by the way, if you're Harris, you want Harris plus 10. Because if they're off by 6 to 7 points, well, there you go. You have like Trump plus 2 to 3. Now, as for Emerson and CBS News, they're good polls. Like, especially Emerson. I trust Emerson. And CBS News, they're one of the few media outlets that they try to have good polls. The problem is they use YouGov, and, well, YouGov is all over the place. But at the bare minimum, yeah, they try. And they did find Harris plus 3. But in the battlegrounds, they have Harris losing states like Pennsylvania, states like Georgia, Arizona. So yeah, she might be up by 3 nationally, but in the battleground states, they have her losing a state like Georgia, a state like Pennsylvania. And that's a problem, even if Harris up by 3, which again, CBS News, they're saying it's plus 3. But even if that's the case, they're showing that Harris is slightly down in the battleground states. So it doesn't matter if she's up by 3 to 4, that may not be enough. She has to win by maybe 4 points just to barely win the Electoral College. That's what some people are just not talking about. They're making it sound like, oh, Harris plus 1 at RCP, that means she's going to win. No. If we assume that there's no big miss on the RCP average, let's say, okay, Harris up by a point. Well, that's still not enough. It's just not. In terms of the current battleground map, she needs to win by like 3 to 4, not by 1.5. For crying out loud, that's worse than Clinton. But on top of all of that, these are the same polls, like the Washington Post, that were wrong in 2020. They were awful back in 2016. And at the same time, back in 2016, the polls had it Clinton +6. 2020, Biden +7.5. Yeah, they were off by 3 points. 3 to 4 points at the same time back in 2016, back in 2020. If there's a 3 to 4 point miss in the RCP average, that's Trump +2. How is that a Harris landslide? In reality, that would be closer to a Trump landslide, because you're talking about Trump doing 7 points better than 2020. A 7-point shift. You're talking about Virginia, Minnesota, even New Mexico being in play. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but that's a possibility. So even if there's no polling error, Harris is still doing worse than Clinton, but there is a polling miss similar to 2020 and 2016. That's a Trump win. That's a huge Trump win. But all right, national polling, they're not everything. What about statewide polling? Let's look at Nevada. Oh, Trump +1. Arizona, Harris +0.2. But there's a big catch. The New York Times released this garbage. If it wasn't for Harris +5, it would be Trump by like a point. And for those that don't believe me, you can look inside of the poll, and it tells you that they claimed Biden won Arizona by 7 points. Yeah, that's the sample. Biden +7. Not Biden +1, not even Biden +2. It was Biden +7. So that means Harris is actually doing 2 points worse than Biden did back in 2020. Yeah, when you look at it that way, yeah, Trump is actually on pace for victory in Arizona. Again, that's just one pollster, but you had polls like Trafalgar. They have a Trump +1. Even PPP, they found Trump +2. The only other polls that have a Harris lead is Cook Political Report, which, by the way, their sample size is so small it doesn't really matter, and Bloomberg, which everyone exposed for possibly faking their numbers, right? So even if Harris up in Arizona, well, look at Georgia. Trump's up by a point there. North Carolina, Trump still is up by a point. Pennsylvania, right now is tied. But yet again, you have the New York Times putting Harris +4 and Quinnipiac, Harris +3. The same polls that back in 2020, they were claiming Biden will win Pennsylvania by 7 to 8 points. He ended up winning it by like a point. You see the problem here. The polls that have a huge Harris lead, or just even a small one, they're the same pollsters every single cycle, especially in the Trump era, where they overstate Democrat support dramatically. And seriously, it's Quinnipiac and the New York Times. They have major problems with their polls. And if you're Harris, you don't want to be up by just 3 with Quinnipiac. You want to be up by like 7. Because if they have a Harris +3, you might as well just shift the poll 5 points Republican. You think I'm kidding? Look at this. You go to Pennsylvania back in 2020. You look up Quinnipiac. Look at that. Biden +7, Biden +8, Biden +13. Yeah, their poll in early October was Biden +13. And at the very end, they started to herd to make it seem a little bit closer. So they could say, well, actually, we were right. There was a surge for Trump. No, you weren't. You're full of shit. So you're telling me the same polls that are off by 5 to 6 points in 2020, they're showing Harris, or actually 6, 7, I should say. They're only showing Harris up by a couple points, if that. That's nothing. If you're the Harris campaign, you want to be up by like 5 to 6, or even 6 to 7 by Quinnipiac. You don't want to be up by just, 3 points. Because if it's a 6-point miss, like it was back in 2020, that's Trump +3. Again, I am not saying that's going to happen, but Quinnipiac has a long track record of sucking in presidential years. They have gotten nothing right. Like, they're claiming Biden's gonna win Wisconsin by like 10 points. He's gonna win Pennsylvania by 13. Yeah, what a great pollster. And they haven't changed. These polls have yet to change, especially the New York Times. It seemed like for a little bit there, they got their act together. They were showing Trump +2, Trump +3 when everyone else was showing about the same thing. But here's something odd. I don't think they changed this entire time. What I think was happening with the New York Times, with even Quinnipiac, it was just getting so bad for Biden that their garbage samples were just swinging so Republican. It didn't matter what they did. It was just getting so bad for him that a bunch of Democrats in their sample were saying, we're done. We can't support this. We're going to bail from Joe. That's what I think was going on here. And in fact, Nate Cohen of the New York Times released this map, which shows who they talked to in North Carolina, in Georgia. And notice something very strange about North Carolina, where they had Harris +2. Notice something very odd. They're showing Kamala Harris doing so good in rural North Carolina. Now, I understand that you do have a bunch of ancestral Democrats in the state. I get that. North Carolina is one of the states that, there are a lot of ancestral Democrats. There are Democrats in rural parts of the state. I get that, all right? But doesn't it seem very odd that a bunch of these deep red counties, there are a ton of blue dots? Look at this. Look at northwestern North Carolina. Look at this. This is a Republican area, and I know you got a blue county up here, but look at this. Outside of that county, it's deep red. Yet they're finding nothing but Democrat voters. Same thing across the entirety of the state. Look at southeastern North Carolina. Look at this. It's Republican. I know there are some Democrat areas. I get that. But by the looks of it, they make it seem like it's a deep blue area. It's going to vote for Harris by 20 points. This kind of confirms my theory that the polls have not changed from 2020. All that was going on was the polling was getting so bad for Joe that even the garbage samples, they were showing the same shift. Because how else can you explain this? How can you just keep polling the same people, the two Democrats in some of these counties? Because, again, there are some Democrat areas in North Carolina that are rural. I get that. But a bunch of these areas, it's clear, they're not polling the Trump voters. They're only polling the single Democrat in a town. That's the problem here. That's what I think's going on. This map kind of confirms it. And look at Georgia. Georgia had Trump +4, and you look at it, and it looks about right. There are some blue dots here and there in Republican parts of the state. I get that. But it's not as insane as North Carolina. That's the difference. Georgia, they're having no problem. But North Carolina, the state that had this weird shift to the left, according to the New York Times, well, look at the map. It's over the place. It doesn't make any sense. Like, where's the Republican part of the state? It makes it look like it's either very purple in most of the state or just deep blue. There's no Republican parts of North Carolina, according to this map. That's the problem. Again, I am not denying the idea that Harris is doing better than Biden. Fine. But the polls still have major problems. And if she's up by only, a point in the RCP average, that's not enough. If these polls have make the same mistakes as they did back in 2020 and in 2016, she's gonna lose. But anyways, folks, thank you so much for watching. If you guys did enjoy this video, smash the like button down below, subscribe, share with your friends, hit that little bell, follow the social media accounts in the description down below, and of course, join the channel today. Godspeed to all of you.